Hello and welcome to The Big Story, where we discuss the top news of today and explain why it matters. I'm Kimberly Jiao, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Electric scooters will be banned from footpaths in Singapore from Tuesday. Let's pause a moment and take a look at this graphic tweeted out by the Land Transport Authority on what's allowed and what isn't on footpaths. So if I may clarify, an e-scooter is described by LTA as having a handlebar and an electric motor. So other PMDs like hoverboards and unicycles will be progressively facing a ban from next year. So the new ban does not affect PMAs or personal mobility aids such as motorized wheelchairs. For now, warning letters will be issued to errant riders, but a zero-tolerance approach will be taken from next year. Come 2020, offenders can be fined up to $2,000 and/or jailed up to 3 months if convicted. The devices will be confined to only 440 kilometers of cycling paths island-wide instead of the 5,500 kilometers of footpaths users could use before. Senior Minister of State for Transport, Dr. Lam Pin Min, announced the tougher stance in Parliament.
At the same time, we understand that we should not push for connectivity at all costs. I think public safety is still paramount, and looking at the current situation, I think it is not possible for government not to make a decisive decision, and therefore the decision to prohibit the use of PMD on footpaths.
Joining us to share more about this is ST journalist Toh Ting Wei. Hi, Ting Wei.
Hello.
So, you know what, a lot of people have been talking about this and there's been talk about this, right? But this decision seems to have happened quite suddenly. Why do you think so?
I agree that it seemed to have happened a bit suddenly because it's in quite stark contrast to what the government has been doing before. E-scooter has been around for at least around 4 years, and I think the government has always been quite patient with them in the sense that they have been upgrading infrastructure, they have been changing regulations and stuff just to accommodate e-scooters because they see it as as an avenue for Singapore to achieve its goal of becoming a 45-minute city with 20-minute towns. So I think the first sign where we heard that a potential ban, maybe not a complete ban, but significant restrictions would come in was last month when Dr. Janil said in Parliament that they could ban the devices if user behaviour don't improve. So in less than a month to really come up with such a significant ban, banning them from footpaths and reducing the areas where they can ride in by I think like maybe 90% around there, that's quite a significant move. So why it happened at this pace, I guess like maybe because the public sentiment has been growing against it, especially following this accident in late September where the 65-year-old cyclist Madam Ong, she died after her bicycle collided with an e-scooter, and the e-scooter, it wasn't compliant with regulations. So at that point in time, I think that's believed to be the first case where a non-rider, like non-PMD user died in an accident involving a PMD.
Right.
And at that point in time, I mean like it kind of makes it very real for people like you and me, like 65-year-old could be anyone's granny, and when you have a face to it and people start getting more, they start treating the issue even more seriously. You have the petition, we have gained more than 75,000 signatures from people calling for PMDs to be banned. So I guess with like this trigger, it kind of even make the issue more serious and got the government moving even more quickly.
I see. So you mentioned this ban earlier, right? So how has the enforcement been like for the current bans? I'm talking about the ones, at the current common areas in HDBs and everything.
So the last update we had last month was that in September there were about 300 cases of errant users who were still riding their PMDs under void decks. So I guess like for how these people were caught seems to be basically through the police surveillance cameras and CCTVs we see at lift landings at void decks. So there are around 70,000 of them in Singapore, so apparently they are tracked through these cameras.
I see.
So in terms of whether this system can be applied here, I think, well, the LTA is trying out like mobile CCTVs to catch errant users. So I guess that could be one avenue. Then they have an enforcement team of that will reach around 200 people by the end of the year. But then whether they can be widespread enforcement is still a question because I mean, when you have 200 monitoring people who are just speeding, and you have 200 people monitoring the whole of Singapore's footpaths for people who use these footpaths illegally, it's a very big difference, and I don't think 200 is enough.
I see. It's quite difficult. you would say, right, to capture all of them. So, we have a previous episode on this show where you guys had a debate, right, between you and I think Elin, where you were actually arguing against this ban, and you were citing concerns, for those who rely on PMDs for their everyday life. So how do you think this is going to sort of affect them?
I think the main people that will get affected are the food delivery riders, because Dr. Lam said in Parliament today that it's not that big a percentage. About 30% of food pandas and delivery riders are PMD users, and Grab didn't really give a percentage. But then, so I guess the number he said is that total in Singapore around 7,000 amongst the big 3 food delivery companies. But then I think maybe 7,000, you look at it, it doesn't seem like that big a number, but to affect a livelihood of 7,000 people, if you have a company folding with 7,000 people holding jobs inside, it will be quite big news. So I think for them, I'm not sure how they'll adapt. Maybe they'll have to get to bicycles, they'll have to try to switch to motorcycles, but definitely I think their earnings will be affected. Because if you look at it for the food delivery riders, e-scooters are quite cheap, maybe like $800, and they can give you the speed of maybe like definitely faster than a bike and less effort, so you can complete more deliveries in a day within a specified time. So with bikes, it'll be slower, and for motorbikes, not all people have motorbike licenses, and it's a lot more expensive. So for them, I think you'll hit them quite hard. For the rest, it will just be, I guess it will inconvenience quite a lot of people who use these devices. But again, at the end of the day, I guess you still have to look at the majority point of view, and majority of people are not e-scooter users. So I guess when the government is looking at this, they are coming from that perspective.
I see. Well, thanks for sharing more with us, Ting Wei. And if you'd like more on this story as it continues to unfold, do stay tuned to straitstimes.com.